All right. So is Georgia Tennessee a must-win game for the Dogs? It seems pretty clear to me now that it is. I mean, because when you're ranked number three, you can fall if you lose. Clearly, if you're number one, you can fall, but you can't fall as far, right? The number one team wouldn't go backwards to eight. If Georgia were to lose to Tennessee, they could, and that would just be terminal. So I don't see how Georgia enters this game without having to win the game now. So we've sort of reverted to old school college football. Y'all remember when everybody was whining about how college football was being ruined by NIL and the transfer portal? Seems to be doing okay right now if you're at Georgia or Tennessee, right? Or Ohio State or Michigan or the Taters or TCU or whoever. There's plenty of transfer players. Hendon Hooker is a transfer player for Tennessee. He's really good. Alabama's got Gibbs and Burton. College football is going to be all right. College football is going to be just fine. NIL. Speaking of which, we got an NIL deal with Kelee Ringo at Red Zone. Take advantage of this. The offer is down below. You can get some stuff signed by Kelee. Uh, Pick this up today because we're running out of availabilities. This is not going to be a real big event for the public. So very, very limited. November 20th at Red Zone. That's the Sunday after the Kentucky game. I've got the details down below. Lock in for that right now. And you've got the ability to get pictures with him, your personalized inscription, stuff like that. So take advantage of that today. Um, you know, when you so with Georgia being the three, I just don't see you would need if there's no saving grace game for Georgia from here on out. I mean, a win over State, Kentucky, or Tech just doesn't get it done. You're getting now penalized for some reason for beating Oregon too bad in the first game, and you know the Alabama game very specifically for Tennessee has bought a lot of goodwill for the Vols. That has shot them up in the mind of this committee clearly. The best game they played though was the Kentucky game, which was this past week at Neyland. The other thing that you'll Tennessee's played a lot of games that mattered at Neyland Stadium. Florida, Alabama, Kentucky. These have all been important games. That's not to suggest they didn't play other important games. The way that they beat LSU, that was an important win. That is one of their top 10 wins. Obviously, surviving at Pitt, last play of the game in overtime. That was also another one. Pittsburgh did not allow the Vols to run the football. That's going to be a huge key to this game. The team that runs the ball, stop me if you've heard this before, between Tennessee and Georgia, the team that runs the ball more effectively is going to win this game, period. So that's why getting Jalen Carter back, I think, is very helpful for the Dogs. Smile Munden. To me, the linebackers being healthy is really important in this game. Now, you've lost Nolan Smith for the year, which is terrible. But, you know, Nolan, Nolan would not primarily be the person dealing with the Hendon Hooker run game. If you watch Hendon Hooker, it's not just that he's older, he's smart. Like he makes the smart play, he makes the easy open pass. And often there are easy open passes for the Vols because, I think they're scheming people into confusion. That's what it looks like to me. And I think, if you're Georgia, um, typically that does not happen to the Dogs, but there are blown coverages that happens. But often when you see that with Tennessee, Tennessee has sort of outsmarted people. I mean, it made Alabama look bad at times, made Florida look bad at times. Florida basically outplayed Tennessee in the first half of their game and then let a busted coverage get the Vols down to like the 5 or whatever it was, and they scored a touchdown. And Tennessee comes in the half with a 17. I think it was 17-14 or 17-13 lead. Florida played them hard and well, and they nearly stole that game at the end. Um, that's the only common opponent between these two teams, which is kind of curious because Georgia and the Gators were, of course, on a neutral field. Tennessee winning by 5, but let's just say Tennessee won by 10. Excuse me, by 12 because of the junk touchdown at the end. still Georgia's win over Florida was more impressive than Tennessee's win over Florida, all things considered. But that is all irrelevant now. I think this is you're going to have to win this game if you're Georgia and you really expect to go on to play in the college football playoff, because it can all end right here. All of the good feeling and all that stuff, it would go away with a loss to Tennessee. This you cannot depend on this committee, which certainly seems like they are flawed. You cannot depend on this committee to get that right, because they're not going to. Now, I've talked about this a lot lately. I think it is probable that three of the top five teams in the country are in the SEC. It is nearly impossible to imagine that Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia will all get into the college football playoff. That's just not going to happen. Even if Georgia beats Tennessee, then Bama beats Georgia, and we have a circling fire squad situation. And frankly, in that scenario, I mean, Georgia and Bama would go play for the SEC championship game, but you couldn't. I mean, could you really say that one team only in the scenario where Georgia beats Alabama could you say there's a defined number one team and defined number two, number three? If they all beat each other, I don't really know what you can say. I mean, how would you leave Tennessee out if all three teams are 1-1-1 or 1-1 against each other? You're gonna have to have expansion if you want to pick up this shirt for free. Guess where you can get it? Our friends at Red Zone. All you gotta do is go grab the book. You can learn more about our signing with Kelee on November 20th there. But just go in now. This is while supplies last. They don't have hundreds of these shirts. Pretty rare shirt, pretty funny shirt, I think. I've not talked Kirby to y'all in a while, but I am talking about Kirby's team right now. Does that count? I thought that you know when you look at the decisive way in which Georgia's won the bulk of their games, all except one. Tennessee has not had the same sort of buzzsaw. They beat the Gators by 5. They beat Alabama by 3 on the last play of the game. I guess they beat Florida on the last play of the game, technically. But then you also talk about certainly the Pittsburgh game. Tennessee has the best couple of wins. They're the only team with 2 top 10 wins. All right. They've not. There have been times that they've not been as impressive as Georgia. However, against I'm telling people keep talking about the Alabama game. The best game Tennessee's probably played in the last 2 years, if not last like 6 years, is their game that they played against Kentucky. They played really well, y'all. I mean, Kentucky I don't think had 230 yards of total offense. That is something else. So they are playing well at the right time. Okay. Yeah, they survived Alabama, and everybody is acting like that is that they didn't survive. Well, they did survive. I mean, they did just the same way Alabama survived A&M and Texas. Georgia certainly survived Missouri. They didn't survive anybody else. Ohio State has not survived anybody but Notre Dame. And Michigan, I guess, has survived Maryland. That's it. So, Tennessee's been a little more up and down than the other top teams. Excuse me, I put Michigan in the top 4 where they belong. I should have talked about Clemson instead. Clemson has definitely been very up and down. I've talked about Clemson a lot. Now, Clemson and Georgia now, I think, are suddenly in very similar situations. They cannot lose. They cannot lose. If they were to lose their games, I think they both would essentially be out. I mean, Clemson would definitely be out because there's just no recovering. I mean, North Carolina would have to zoom into the top 5 or whatever. North Carolina has also lost to Notre Dame, though, so that's some tricky situation there. But I do want to just really quick look up the Clemson line with Notre Dame. Wow, that's all over the place. Is it? Oh, no, 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 no. Okay, okay, okay. So it opened at 5.5, and it's kind of squeezed to 3.5. I will believe Clemson losing when I see it. They just don't. They just don't lose a lot. Number one, and they don't play a schedule where you're conducive to losing. It's the combination of both. They are good enough certainly for the schedule that they played. They should get to Charlotte undefeated if it's in Charlotte. Is it in Charlotte this year or is it in Tampa? But for the Dogs, the only way, I mean, for the winner of this game, if the winner of this game gets to Atlanta undefeated, they will be in the playoff. The loser of this game, particularly if it's Georgia, is in a much trickier situation. They're not just going to be able to say, oh, look at our win against Oregon, because it doesn't look like that win means that much. Because if it did, and we know that the committee's not been very intellectually honest, but if it did, the blowout win over Oregon would be number 8 Oregon would be a bigger jewel than Ohio State's win on the road, a kind of a routine win over Penn State. The committee didn't see it that way. They put Ohio State in front of Georgia, which is different than the reason they put Tennessee in front of Ohio State and Georgia. I just don't know. That's why this game is must win. It's must win because you got to win.